I want to say how excited I am to be moderating this august group of panelists. And the subject is just terrific. It's the Arts, Medicine, and Health Forum, a conversation for our time. And I was just reflecting with some of our panelists that today is indeed the day that the WHO declared the pandemic in our world. It's a 1 year anniversary, and how timely it is to be talking about medicine, health, and the arts. We have four fantastic panelists, and as a sort of opening, first of all, I wanted to thank a couple of people, and then I'm going to read short bios of our panelists and then have a free-ranging conversation discussion. I want to welcome everybody who's here with us today. We're very, very happy that we're together. I want to thank Jerry and Rick Crawford, great friends of the college and the School of Music and the university, for their amazing generosity in helping us pursue important research and arts and partnerships. It really warms the heart to have community friends and colleagues like the Crawfords. I want to thank Ashley Stone for helping us with all the technical bits of today. And of course, I want to thank our panelists. And Stephen Caplan and I have worked for quite some time, as Stephen is the chair of our research task force in the college. So I just wanted to thank a few people. We have here with us today Randall Dick, Professor Kopek, Dean and Vice President Marc J. Kahn, and Professor Stephen Caplan. And I'm going to read a short bio for each of our distinguished panelists. Randall Dick is a fellow in the American College of Sports Medicine. He worked for many years with the NCAA, managing its sports medicine and injury prevention programs, transitioned to Eli Lilly and Company in a real-world evidence role, developing research applications for large electronic health records, and currently works for IBM Watson Health Arts, a nonprofit coalition of sports and arts organizations that strives to integrate sports medicine principles and wellness into the performing arts. He has authored more than 40 peer-reviewed publications and multiple book chapters on a variety of sports medicine and performing arts issues. Professor and Professor Dean and Vice President Marc J. Kahn, as I said, is Dean and Vice President for Health Affairs at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas School of Medicine, where he is also a professor in the Department of Medicine. After completing his undergraduate studies, medical school, residency, chief medical residency in hematology, medical oncology fellowship, all at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Kahn began his faculty career at Tulane in 1994. In 2010, Dr. Kahn received his MBA from Tulane's Freeman School of Business with concentrations in both international business and finance. And he was appointed dean here at UNLV in April of 2020. And all of these panelists can say more about themselves. I'm just reading really short bios. Professor Kopek holds a PhD in environmental psychology, master's degrees in community psychology and architecture, and a bachelor's degree in health sciences. He has published several books pertaining to health and well-being through design. His most recent publication, Person-Centered Healthcare Design, will be released next month. His book, Environmental Psychology for Design, is in its third edition and considered a seminal publication. He has also served 2 appointed terms as Fulbright Reviewer, is a 2-time recipient of the Joe Polsky Prize, and received an honorary fellowship to the American Society for Interior Designers, ASID. Professor Dr. Stephen Caplan is a professor of music at UNLV and director of the CFA Consortium for Health and Injury Prevention. He developed coursework about performing arts health for undergraduate and graduate students at UNLV and has presented workshops and masterclasses all over the world. Dr. Caplan is also principal oboist for the Las Vegas Philharmonic and has written 2 acclaimed books addressing healthy practice techniques for oboe players. So our dear friends listening to this forum will see the incredible interdisciplinary interests of our 4 panelists. And I want to see what an incredible university we have, where the School of Medicine and the College of Fine Arts, which includes the School of Architecture, and our research fellow, our research scholar in residence here, Randall Dick, can all come together and have a wide-ranging conversation. I think we'll start today with Randy Dick. I'll kind of call on each of you to have sort of opening remarks, and then we'll get together and have our discussion. Randy, how are you thinking about the subject of today's forum, which is, of course, the arts, medicine, and health?
Yep. So Ashley, I had about 4 slides. Do I need to pull those up, or do you show those? I'm not sure how to do that. I can share my screen and pull them up if you need me to.
Ashley, you're muted.
Thank you for that reminder. If you could, that'd be great. Do I need to make your phone a co-host, or is your computer okay?
Well, I'm not sure. Right now I'm speaking off my phone, so as long as you guys can hear me, I guess I'm okay.
All righty, we're good.
All right. Can you guys see the slides here?
Yeah.
Okay. So along with my background, I help coordinate a non-for-profit called Athletes in the Arts. And we got started on this in 2013 formally, but informally in about 2009. And basically, when you look at these types of text explanations, practice and play every day, play through pain, etc., it can describe, and initially most people think it describes an athlete, whether it's professional or non-professional. But many of these descriptors also, actually all these descriptors also can apply to performing artists as well. And so part of what Athletes in the Arts is doing is trying to take what we've already learned about how to handle these things in the sport athlete world and try to apply them to the performing arts world. There's a lot of overlap. These types of things are all things that live in both the sport athlete world and the performing arts world. And there's been good research and published research for several years on the sports medicine side of things as they apply to sport athletes. Some of this can apply to the performing arts, and some of it needs to be unique research. And our goal is to try to integrate what we already know in the sport world and into the performing arts world, and also take things that the performing artists can push back into the sport athlete world. For example, things like rhythm, things like balance. If you remember way back, Lynn Swan, who was a wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers, took ballet lessons. So there's things that the performing arts world can also push back that other direction. And the other thing that's very unique, yes, I'm sorry. The other thing that's very unique about this population is it's very broad and diverse. So we're talking about very young to very old. We're talking about very dynamic to very static or relatively static. We're talking about a whole variety of different performing arts genre, including some of the ones like in architecture that would be arts in general that isn't even represented on this slide. So there is a wide range of, it's a needy population, and there's a wide range of opportunities to do research and to help these folks that are very underserved right now by most of the medical, their medical needs. And then John Batiste is one of the ambassadors that helps with our Athletes in the Arts initiative, and I think this quote sort of says a lot about, you know, to get better in performing arts. At least when he went through Juilliard, it was basically just practice more. And there was no real discussion about nutrition or other quantifiable methods of understanding how to have better performance. And so I think the slate's pretty clean in terms of the opportunities out there to benefit performing arts. And that's what Athletes in the Arts is trying to do. And that's what I'm also happy to be working with you all and sharing ideas on how we can do that. Thank you.
Randy, thank you so much for those words, and we'll get back to you for our discussion. But I would like to introduce our Dean, Marc J. Kahn, and ask Dean Kahn to also give some impressions about this important work.
Thank you, Nancy. So first, let me say John Batiste grew up in Metairie, Louisiana. He went to the same creative arts high school that my son did, as did Ellen DeGeneres, and as did Trombone Shorty. and Harry Connick Jr. and many others. So, and all the Marsalis brothers went there as well. So I'm glad you brought up John Batiste. Anyway, so let me tell you a story because I like storytelling. So in 1989, I was a chief resident at Penn. And we shared a VA with another medical school, and a faculty member there came to me and said, you know, I'd like to see how well your residents can appreciate heart sounds because I'm doing a study. And I said, sure, the residents can participate in the study, but we'd also like a little talk from you on examining the heart. And he did it. And I was impressed that his affection for heart sounds really wasn't so much heart sounds, but rather his appreciation for arts and humanities. And, you know, we each went our own way. And about 15 years ago, we had a speaker for Grand Rounds at Tulane, and it's none other than the same Sal Mangione, and he was scheduled to talk to me because someone thought that we would kind of hit it off. And when I saw Sal, I said, we know each other. He said, we do. And I reminded him, and he remembered, and we really rekindled a friendship and a collaboration that's persisted to this day. So Sal and I really recognize a mutual passion for the role of humanities and arts in medicine. And we both really sort of pined at the fact that this has been lost. And when we looked in medicine at some of our real founders and principal idea people, folks like William Osler, you know, who said that the arts and science of medicine aren't separate, but rather twin berries on one stem. And we wanted to get back to that. And we said, you know, it's fine to talk about this, but the evidence-based people in medicine are going to want to see some proof. So Sal and I wrote a piece, sort of a position piece that we titled A Tale of Two Brains, How to Rekindle the Artist Within. And then we embarked on a study. So we took, we had involved 5 medical schools in this study. And it was a simple study by design. We asked medical students about their exposure to arts. Do you sing? Do you listen to music? Do you act? Do you go to plays? Do you write poetry? Do you cook? And we were able to quantify that, but we also had them take a series of standardized tests, if you will, on empathy, wisdom, tolerance of ambiguity, burnout, spatial recognition, etc. And this is the first time in my career that I designed a study that came out absolutely perfect with strikingly statistically significant findings that there's this really robust association between exposure to arts and positive qualities in medical students. So the more you participated or experienced art, the more wisdom you had, the more tolerance of ambiguity, the more empathy, the less burnout. It was striking. So we, you know, published our study, and it got some acclaim, and CNN talked to us and whatnot. The story continues because when I came here and met Nancy, probably in one of my interviews, we started talking about art and medicine. And Nancy said there's a group of people actually, my faculty, interested in this. And I really became interested. And Nancy has involved me, I guess, in a couple of these conversations. But what came out of probably the last discussion or so is another study. And that is one of the important elements of being a good physician is the art of observation. So what do you see? And we're working with Nora Sandovar and some others, and Annie Weitzman's really taking the lead on this from our shop. And what we're going to do is we're going to take medical students, probably at least 2 institutions, and train them in improvisation. The theory being that if you can practice improv, you have to be able to read emotion. You have to be able to observe. You have to be able to interpret. And we're going to give the students a pre-post test using a standardized test developed by, of all people, Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin. It's a facial recognition scale. And we think our hypothesis is that students that participate in improv are going to be better at reading facial expressions. And furthermore, as you practice improv and learn improv, you get better at these recognition. So this was a story just to talk about how important arts are to our field of medicine, how it's been lost, how there's skepticism amongst my peers, unfortunately, that this is important, and how we really need to bring this back. And finally, how a university with its resources can actually, in a scientific way, study these things so that we can change perception, at least amongst physicians. That's my story. That's why I'm here, and I'm really excited. I thank you, Nancy.
Oh, Marc, that was inspiring and exciting, and we all see a beautiful pathway ahead for us to work together and change perceptions and create new knowledge. Thank you so much. Professor Kopek, we're so happy to have you here. Also, one of the most interdisciplinary thinkers that I know. So, Dak, how would you like to start this work with us?
Thank you, Nancy. I'm going to just show a couple of slides, and I'm going to build a little bit on Dr. Kahn's empathy, because it's a huge portion within design itself is these of empathy. So you should be able to all see my screen right now. And this is going to be my soapbox moment. And that is that most of us are born inside of the built environment. We spend roughly greater than 80% of our entire lives inside of the built environment, and we tend to pass on within the built environment. But yet the interior design of the built environment is one of the most overlooked disciplines, I think, within most of the design itself. And so we at UNLV and within the interiors program are trying to change that, and we're trying to say, how is it that we look at these built environments, and what is it that they mean to us? What's the associative meaning that we bring when a person gives birth to a child, and how do they remember that environment? How do they remember the people? And what were the factors that went in to create that experiential memory? So with that, I'm going to explain a project that we're currently working on, which is the development of a drug and alcohol treatment facility. And one of the very first things that we do is an in-depth review of the literature. And so the students have had to learn the difference between the stimulants and the depressants, and they have to try to imagine and empathize with a person who has undergone some type of a substance abuse for a period of time. And so we try to create, as Dr. Kahn says, we try to create stories, and we try to imagine how they feel, what they experience, what their life is going to be like. We then take a look at that information, and that comes from the literature review, and we boil it into a theoretical framework. This particular theoretical framework, we looked at Tony Robbins' human dimensions, which there are 6 of, and we reflected that upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because we're able to distill them into intrinsic versus extrinsic, or a physiological aspect versus a psychological aspect. One might feel unsafe, and that would create a physiological response. However, it is a psychological emotion. That information is then distilled through Caplan and Caplan preference model. And we did that because we want people to be excited about where they are. We want them to feel proud, and we want to evoke a sense of satisfaction and affiliation with the place that they're working on. And so we built this relationship. From there, we take each of the different spaces. And so here you're looking at one space, which is a cooking lab, which is used for therapeutic purposes. As you can see from the exterior, and I want to give a shout out to my 2 graduate students, Daphne Odette and Nix Z, who are in this presentation today, because this is their project. They take a look at the certainty. As you can see, the certainty goes into a sprinkler system, it starts going into a knife system, and it starts going into the wash basin. When you look at the knife system, we're definitely looking at a safety issue here. We don't want people to commit suicide, and we don't want to have explosive behavioral actions. From the safety, we started to say, well, how do you create safety and mystery? Mystery is a unique aspect of the Caplan and Caplan preference model, which helps us to affiliate better with environments. And that's where we ended up coming up with a knife system, because you have to use knives when you're cooking, but how do you do it so it's safe? But how do you also present the knives so that they're not punitive? And so we come up with ideations, and this is the ideations that the ladies came up with. It's a fingerprint ideation, so the individual would put their hand on the top of the glass here. That glass would open, and then there's a record to say that Sally Smith took out that knife, and then that knife would have to be replaced by Sally Smith. At the end of the cooking lab, if there's a missing knife, we know who took the knife and where the knife went to. And so this is the process that we are using to start to merge the way design thinking and the interior design, but we first have to understand the audience that we're trying to serve.
Fascinating. Very, very interesting. Deb, thank you so much. You finished your first presentation here. Thank you so much. Good. And now we're on to our final panelist, Dr. Stephen Caplan. Stephen, so good to have you as always.
Hi there. It's great to be here, and I really enjoyed hearing those other presentations. There's so much interesting new work being developed in the arts. So I was on the panel in the fall, and I talked a lot about specifics of things I've been doing over like 30 plus years at UNLV. Introducing coursework for performing artists about health issues. And the past 3 years or so, putting together this consortium of health and injury prevention for the whole College of Fine Arts, and it includes some people outside of the College of Fine Arts as well. We have partners from all over the university, and we've been doing a variety of things, simple things like distributing free earplugs in any of our spaces in the College of Fine Arts where there are high noise levels, and offering workshops for Clark County teachers and for our medical school students, things like that, a variety of things. But I talked about all that stuff last time. This time I'm back because I wanted to give a little update on this exciting new project we've been lucky enough to get some funding for, and that's about to happen, blossom any day now. And that's a clinic for health and injury prevention on campus at UNLV near our facilities. So I've been filling out all kinds of work orders and talking to people about installing mirrors and opening boxes and checking inventories, because we're really right after spring break hoping to open this, even during COVID. The other thing, of course, has been developing COVID protocols. The staff for this will all be vaccinated by the time 2 weeks comes after spring break. And we have specific protocols that have been approved by higher authorities so that we can open this clinic. So what is a clinic? It's going to be for all of our performing arts students and faculty, any that are experiencing pain or injury for whatever reasons related to their performance and practice. They can come into this clinic. Of course, during COVID, it would have to be prearranged that they have a specific appointment. We wouldn't have more than one person there at a time. But this is a place where they can get an assessment to figure out what's going on, and also to start getting some rehabilitation training. Some of the boxes I've been opening have been ankle weights and wrist weights, and we have a ballet bar in there so we can work with our dancers, resistance bands, all the types of things that many physical therapists work with. And so I'm not a physical therapist. How is all this happening? I've been very fortunate to work with Cassie Turner, who is in our Department of Integrated Health Sciences. She's a former dancer who then worked as a physical therapist and now teaches for physical therapy here at UNLV. And she's been working with UNLV dancers since 2018, doing this type of screening and assessment, but out of her studio, which is on the other side of campus, which also has very limited hours. But she's done some very fine work with her students. It's students who are in the last semester or so, a couple of semesters of their training, who are getting practical work. They work under the direct supervision of Cassie, so you get two people helping the students. And they've also done some interesting research studies that have been published nationally and presented at national conferences just related to our dancers. So working with this clinic, what it allows us to do that's a little different is to have something on site that's a reliable place that students know they can go to on a regular basis. Of course, we'll be working with UNLV Wellness Center as well, but those of you who know our campus layout know that it's really not that far. It maybe takes 10 minutes or so to walk from where our performing arts facilities are to the Wellness Center. But that is a little too far, apparently. I can't tell you how many students I run into who just will not make that walk to the other side of campus to take advantage of those services. So the fact that we'll have this facility right there in our building is going to make an enormous difference, and it will make a difference in getting the students to come back and to be able to work directly, if the student wants it, to work directly with the student and their teacher together, perhaps to help to rehabilitate and retrain if that's necessary. So as I said, we're really excited about this, and we're hoping it will be opening shortly after spring break. And once that happens, the other thing that's exciting to me about it, and this is the final thing I'll talk about now, is just that it will allow us to further reach develop more collaborative efforts throughout the university. I did attend, I think it was just last Friday, wonderful, it was a sports research summit that was held for UNLV, a Zoom summit, couple of hours, really well done. And as Randy was saying at the beginning of this presentation, there are so many linkages between what we do in sports training and what performing artists do. Both groups have a type of performance anxiety. We have to train in a very specialized way for that performance. We experience similar injuries, often repetitive stress commonalities between the two groups, and yet they don't often connect with each other. So we're starting, this is a wonderful project that's fairly new at UNLV, the Sports Research and Innovation Initiative. That's been happening, and I could see already, and already made some contacts just Friday, that they're open to collaborating with the performing arts. So that's a future possible thing, and obviously our medical school as well. The medical students do research, and we would love to be able to invite them to collaborate with us on specific research areas related to performing arts health. So, those are just some of the things that by actually physically having a place on campus to do this work, it's really opening up a whole new world for all of the performing artists here in Las Vegas.
Stephen, thank you so much. We have so much synergy within this group of panelists, looking at the sports medicine and performing arts, looking at the healthcare design work that Jack has done, looking at the stories of our medical dean, Marc Kahn, and looking at the intersections, the interstices, the synergies. It's very, very exciting. I was reflecting that today is actually a 1-year anniversary of the WHO declaring that we have a pandemic in the world. And I was wondering, over this last year, as well as all of the terrible hardship and sadness and tragedy that most of us, one way or another, have experienced either through our own friends or families or heard about, there were always, in my view, these two polar opposites. We were experiencing incredible pain and anxiety and worry and terrible sadness about all that has transpired. And then there was this innovation, I think, that we could create as a result of going through such a terribly difficult and unusual and unexpected time. I'm curious about, how did this year change you? Change the way you thought about your work, change the way you thought about innovation, and what do you see, some of the learnings and lessons, how do you see that empowering you and enriching your lives as we move forward? if you did sense that. Yes, Marc?
Yeah, so Nancy, this is sort of my second crisis in my career. I guess the first was Hurricane Katrina, a very different event, a very local event. So we frequently had to remind people what we had been through. But I think that the one thing that crises do is they break down silos and they allow you to innovate, especially with the cohort of people that are going through this together. With Katrina, it was, our faculty, our students. With the pandemic, it's the world faculty and the world students. But, it gives you an opportunity to think about different ways to do things. So who would have thought we'd be having a meeting like this 2 years ago, right? You wouldn't have thought about it. It would have been in person. We would have said this just can't work, right? You can't read human emotion. And there are people better experts than I on the call, but I'm going to argue that Zoom has probably changed our brains a bit so that we recognize emotion differently. But we're still able to do it. It's still that human contact. So I think the biggest thing for me is, it breaks down silos.
I think that's very perceptive. Very good point. Other perspectives? Zach?
Yeah, I can maybe follow up on that a little bit. If you go to our website, I'm not trying to promote it, but there's a way to find that athletes, and if you just Google athletes and the arts, you'll get to our website. But on the front page, there is a pretty amazing summary and link to a study on aerosol research that was started by the High School Federation. Believe it or not, the High School Federation also oversees music and dance as well as sport athletes, and the American Director of Bands, the Director of Bands, and they solicited and got over $300,000 of research dollars starting in April, when this COVID was hitting all these music programs, from over 100 different performing arts, mostly music organizations. And they've now done significant research to lead the way to help people understand how you can play music in a safe environment in coronavirus times. And so what that opened up to me is the fact that all these arts organizations, none of which have much money, saw the value of ponying up and working together to come up with this research that benefits all of them to allow them to continue to go. And it's just amazing research done by researchers at University of Colorado and University of Maryland. And the second thing is that the ability of these organizations that are running this, the High School Federation, which doesn't have a lot of money or staff either, to be able to coordinate this and come out with publications that are influencing the performing arts world from just the spur of an idea to where it is right now. And if you want to find out more about this, go to the Athletes in the Arts website, and there's a link right on the front page that shows you all of the work that they've done. Just fantastic.
Randy, thank you so much. That's really, really an interesting reflection. We appreciate that. Dak, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that this year has really opened up a lot of opportunities, and I think that a lot of the younger people who are digital natives have been very influential in being able to help some of us that have a little bit more gum recession to identify the possibilities of what's available and what can be done. And we in the design world, we always have to have juries to review the work in our interdisciplinary aspects. And I've been able to bring in colleagues from all over the country, from the bigger cities and the bigger design firms, which has been a very rich experience. So I personally think that we're going to see a lot of innovation, and we're going to see how our younger generations are going to take this opportunity and really shine with it to make the world a better place in the next 10 years.
It's a great feeling of optimism. Thank you for sharing that, Jack. Really interesting. Stephen, how have you felt about this year and how it would affect us moving forward?
Well, I'll follow up first of all on that aerosol study that Randy was talking about. It is a really important study, and there have been others that have been done in America and in other places around the world. But I'm seeing already, it's just sort of amazing that nobody had ever really done studies like this before to really understand how aerosols are transmitted when people sing and when they play an instrument. I mean, people have been doing that for hundreds of years, more, thousands, millenniums, and there's been lots of scientific research over the past 100 years at least, and yet nobody's really done significant work that way. So the COVID forced them to start doing that. And I've seen already that it's going to significantly change the way we get back to music making in the future. I've talked to people with some of our major symphony orchestras in America, and they're very seriously looking at the ventilation system and the design of the concert halls that they're performing in. And they're understanding that there's a need for some change there, and they're starting to make those changes. And I think certainly during COVID, we're finding a way 6 feet, 12 feet apart, maybe to perform indoors again using these guidelines. But even when we don't have to go to that extreme, I think this new understanding of how ventilations work within buildings in relation to instruments and singing and such, there are going to be less people spreading around and getting the flu from each other and other things that used to happen all the time that we just accepted. And so I think things will be healthier generally. So some of the other things I've noticed are, of course, in my field, this time of reflection has allowed many musicians to take the time to just think about what they're doing with their lives and what they do in the practice room. And so people are starting to focus much more on the idea of practicing in a holistic, whole body way that's really healthy, mentally healthy and physically healthy. And people have really started changing just very foundational things about their approach to singing or their instrument, so that it is more healthy, so they can have a longer career and a career that they enjoy and feel more comfortable about. And that's been a fantastic bonus of this era. Two of the negative things I see happening are, one, and there's a seminar coming up. I believe it's the American Symphony Orchestra League. I saw was doing a seminar in the next week or so about this. There's a lot of fear that once people do start getting, as the restrictions are being loosened right now, and people are able to perform again, that they're going to kind of go crazy. And they're going to be so excited about performing that they're just going to take every gig possible. And we're going to see a lot more injury all of a sudden than maybe we need to. And so we want to be preventative and warn people about being careful about how they get back into a practice routine and to be sure to perform and practice mindfully. And the other thing is a mental health aspect that you brought up. I'm actually going to a seminar, I think it's in about 3 weeks, that Peabody Conservatory is sponsoring, specifically on how to work with artists, musicians, dancers, all performing artists, on basically PTSD issues. How do you deal with trauma in the practice room and in the teaching studio? Because I think all of us are going to be dealing with that with our fellow performers and with our students to a greater degree than we ever have before. This has been a really tough time for everybody. And so so I feel like there's a need for maybe some specialized training for those of us who are teachers, to try to understand this and be a little more empathetic about it, and to know when it's time to let a professional take over as well. So those are the impacts that I see right now.
Thank you so much. All four of your reflections were really valuable and wonderful. Thank you. I think when I look at the four of you and listen to your ideas, it occurs to me each one of you is an influencer. Each one of you has had a rich life in which you've explored multiple interests, and you've looked at the integration of knowledge. You've looked in really inventive ways at creating new knowledge. How do you feel about this way of looking at our disciplines, integrating them, talking about the creation of new knowledge differently? What implications do we have in this room with these four panelists for the way we educate our students for the future, and the way they will look at their future careers and becoming influencers in their generation? It's a bit of a elusive question, but I'm curious because each one of you has had such an interesting career trajectory. And I think we wish that for our students as well.
Well, I'll tell you, Nancy, it's kind of a no-brainer for me. I mean, having an associate's degree in exercise physiology, then public health, then in psychology, then architecture. I'm natural born interdisciplinarian. And I think that it is so valuable, particularly within the design professions, to really understand what other people go through and how they experience the world. And so I think that there's a huge richness to not look at the world and look at our professions and look at our day-to-day lives from a segmented point of view, but rather from a holistic and understanding the values and the intricacies and the interconnections between all of them. So I mean, it's just part of who I am. So thank you for that question.
Well,
And you know, Nancy, diverse groups solve problems better. So when you get artists and engineers and physicians and you name it, you just solve problems better. You come at things a bit differently. Let me tell you another, I like stories. So a quick story. My son, who is an artist, and when he got out of college, his first job was he worked in an arts immersion charter school in New Orleans, and they had a problem getting the right kids on the right bus at the end of the day. So the principal, who was very smart, turned it over to these teachers who were artists. They came up with a completely different way of thinking about it. They used their artistic abilities, and it worked, right? So we just got to look, we got to value this diversity of thought to solve problems. It's just critical. And there's a lot of problems in our society. There's problems in our university, and we're not going to solve them with a single discipline. You got to work together.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's just a
And I guess-
great. Randy, did you want to say?
Yeah,
something?
I would say, from my perspective, yeah, I think the challenge is when you're looking at the performing arts profession, is you need to be able to respect tradition, but you also have to be open to innovation. And like John Batiste said, when he was at Juilliard, they just said practice more. Well, there's ways to get better besides maybe practicing more. Maybe it's more mental training. Maybe it's going through your piece in your head while you're swimming. Maybe it's having better nutrition. What we learned when I was with the NCAA is the football coaches who are influencers, you know, didn't know the science. Back in the day, no water for football people, salt tablets, wrestlers in rubber suits, and they were dying in rubber suits trying to lose weight. That's all changed now because we've applied science there, but we haven't applied science in performing arts as much. And so we need to take the science, whether it's new science or science that exists in the sports medicine world, and applying it to the performing artists. And the instructors or the choreographers are the coaches in the performing arts world, and they are the influencers, and we need to reach them to help them understand their impact on all these people. And so the new generations of performers that are coming up now need to say, I don't need to follow this just because everybody else followed it. I need to think about how I improve or do better or love what I do, but also do it in a way that makes it healthy for me and others. And I think we've got to get that spark in the mindset of those people.
You know, it's a jazz allegory, right? I mean, it's improv. Miles Davis said it's not the notes that are there, it's the notes that aren't there that you play, right? It's the improvisation that leads to new ideas.
That is really fantastic.
I would
Stephen?
just add that that the students I work with want to explore more avenues like this. So just like we were hearing earlier, that they're med students who like to dance and like to write poetry and like to play music and would like to bring these worlds together a little bit more. I know it's tough because obviously the med school curriculum is very rigorous and there's a lot they already have to do. But if there are ways to bring that in, the students appreciate it so much. And I find the same thing in our music school. I run across many students that would like to branch out and include some of them want to be doctors. I run into people who want to be doctors, but right now they're in undergrad pursuing music because they love that. But they'd love to be able to open up and link those worlds together. And I run across students like that all the time. And again, music is a very rigorous curriculum as well. But that's why I think it's so important that's why I've introduced the coursework I have at UNLV, but we need to integrate it into all our coursework in different ways if we can.
Nancy, why don't you talk about our program?
Yes, well, we're about to launch a new Creative Medical Scholars Program, but there's no one more knowledgeable about that than Dr. Kahn. So would you like to tell a story about Tulane and how we're going to do it a little bit differently? We're very excited about this program.
Yeah, so let me tell a story. So, for a long time, I've thought that, humanities are valuable in medicine. We've talked about that. I've told that story already today. But, there's some data in the medical literature that non-science majors do at least as well and maybe a little bit better in medical school than their science counterparts. So at Tulane, we put a program together called Creative Pre-Medical Scholars, where we took students at the end of their second year who had taken their pre-med requirements, and we said, look, they had to interview with a panel of us that included fine arts faculty, et cetera. But we said, look, if you will major in an art and do an honors thesis or a capstone project and maintain a certain GPA, we're going to accept you to medical school now, right? And over 25 years, those students really did very well in medical school. So when I got here, Nancy and I started talking about this. So we're going to start a program called the Creative Pre-Medical Scholars Program, where we're going to take students that apply to UNLV as undergrads and say, look, if you're willing to major in a fine art, you got to take some pre-med courses. We'll figure out where they are. And you do a capstone project and maintain a certain GPA, we're accepting you to medical school at the time that we've accepted you as an undergrad. A couple things happen with that. Firstly, I think we now get a type of student that would otherwise perhaps go elsewhere, because it's a unique program. Secondly, we bring artists into medicine, which is something I want to do. And thirdly, we do exactly what you said, Steve. We show people who have a passion for performance arts who want to go to medical school, and we provide a very real and transparent process for them to do that. So we're going to start that this year. We weren't able to recruit them because of COVID and because we started late, but we're going to identify a cohort of 3 students or so, that want to do this. And we're going to start the program this fall.
And then we'll recruit for it. And we have our recruitment specialist here, Ashley Stone, who's listening very carefully to this. But what occurs to me, I'm so inspired by this forum and by the panelists and the discussion. It just occurs to me how much possibility there is in the world. And it would take many lifetimes to uncover it all, but we're going to all do our best during our lifetimes to make sure that we do everything we can to make possibility real. And I felt with each of the 4 panelists that there was just so much richness in what each person said about what the future can be for us. And I want to thank everyone. And I don't know if this is the right moment to ask Ashley if I haven't been looking at the chat, but are there questions from our members of our group here listening that we could have a little bit of a Q&A session now? Is that something that would be a good thing to do? I
haven't seen any questions presented in chat, but I certainly invite folks. You all have the power to unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask a question. Or
I
you
think
can
a
type it in
question
chat.
just came in.
Oh, yes.
But from Ted Hartwell. For Stephen, will there be a prevention component to the new clinic at UNLV, something that helps especially early career student performers learn how to avoid common types of performance-related injuries?
Thank you for that question, Ted. We actually have that already going within the music school because I have both an undergraduate and a graduate level course. Currently, our performance majors are actually required to take the undergraduate course. So the course covers all types of aspects of health, including hearing health, mental health, and exactly what you're talking about, avoiding those common types of stress-related, repetitive stress injuries. So we're doing it in that way, but also the idea of this clinic and what I was doing also for the past couple of years is I have like an open office hours, about 3 hours usually on a Friday, where any student that's experiencing or is in fear of something like this happening can just come by and talk to me. They can bring their instrument and show me what they're having issues with, and I'll work with them directly. And that's been a free service I've been providing for a while. But again, just having the visibility of the clinic on campus with a dedicated room, I think is going to make more students aware that that we're there to help them. That was part of the reason also for forming the consortium that we did, to encourage more of this type of discussion in all the areas in the College of Fine Arts. So I know in dance, they're doing an excellent job just integrating this information into their regular coursework. They talk about nutrition a lot and different, they're very cognizant of kind of a whole body awareness as they're doing different dance drills and things like that. And I think theater has started more and more to do this as well. So we're trying to get more of this happening through the entire college.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there other questions or comments that our audience would like to integrate into our conversation here? Maybe put them in the chat or let us know somehow. And if not, we'll keep having our conversation with our panelists. Are there any other issues or ideas that we didn't bring up today that you would like to add to this conversation, which is already so rich?
This is Randy. I mentioned this last time briefly, but I think it's one of the things I'm very interested in is the fact that we really don't have a way to quantify performance in performing arts, and if we can come up with a way to do a cohort of people that practice X number of hours and then have some way to measure how, whatever subjective way, but get a more quantitative way of where they are in their performance, and then have another group of people that maybe practice less, but then do some mental training and maybe do some swimming and some other things that aren't necessarily just around their instrument, and see if you can get those same people to reach that level of performance. But in order to do that, you have to have some kind of quantifiable measure. Is it how long you hold a note? Is it whatever, doing this, doing that? And that's, we do that in sports. We time people and we know if they get faster, if we train them a certain way and we can time them, see if they get faster. It's a little hard to quantify that in performing arts. And so to me, that's a ripe area for development and research. And if we can do it, then we can provide alternatives other than just volume of practice to allow people to try to enhance their skill in their craft.
That's a wonderful comment, Randy, and it also brings up, I think, the need and desire we have to be able to do more research in general. I mean, Marc Kahn brought up a very interesting study that, Marc, that you had done some time ago, and we have this task force of research on the arts that Stephen Caplan chairs, and I think we're really trying to grapple with how do we create meaningful knowledge through studies and through other research paradigms. I think it's a fascinating question for the 21st century.
There must be ways to measure. I guess this would only work for some performance, but let's take piano or guitar. There must be a way to measure dexterity. How quickly can you change, how fast you're moving your fingers? There must be a way to measure that. And if not, I bet you that an engineering student in the engineering school could figure this out pretty quickly.
Well, there have been studies that have done things like you're talking about. The issue, though, is that so much of when it comes to what makes a performance great is just a subjective thing. It's an unquantifiable thing. And so there have been people who have attempted what Randy's talking about, but there are certain limits. But there is a way to measure certain things? Can they reach the high note? What's the volume? What's the speed? And how can you get that speed to increase over time? And are there ways to improve practicing so that it can be more efficient? And what I wanted to add is that we're really lucky here at UNLV, because I've found out about, again, in the area of sports research, we have some incredible stuff going on in kinesiology, specifically related to this. There's Gabby Wolf doing optimal learning theory, she calls it, and has done some amazing research with a variety of athletes. That's very similar to what Randy's talking about with athletes. And so I've already talked to her about doing some of the similar work with our musicians. And in fact, I'm currently working with a D.M.A student to replicate one of her studies with music. But then at the sports thing I went to last Friday, I connected with someone in psychology who's doing, it's called TOPS. And I'm going to find out more details, but it seems to be looking at how we can improve the mental health of athletes in order to allow them to progress at a faster rate. So this research is being done on campus right here, and we're starting to make those connections. So I think we're going to be able to apply it to the performing arts and hopefully contribute to the global knowledge about this.
I noticed that Todd, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that we can also use more qualitative data, and we can start to develop more of the exploratory studies that can serve as the foundation for the outcomes. I think that there's a lot of richness that can be obtained in the smaller, more qualitative approaches, particularly as we start looking at the performative arts.
I noticed that Todd Fitzpatrick had a question for us, for our panelists. He wrote, from your perspectives, what health impacts may be unique to performing artists living and working in the desert and Las Vegas specifically?
I could answer, and Todd knows some of the answers to these, I know already, but certainly our dry climate is a challenge for instrumentalists and singers, especially singers. So there are unique things that we have to deal with because of the lack of humidity. Today, we finally got a teeny bit of rain out here in Henderson. That was really welcome. But that definitely is an area where more research could be done. There has been some research. In fact, Todd, I think, helped with some research with this, but we definitely want to do more with that. I think another area is the circus arts. Of course, obviously Cirque du Soleil, but there's a rich variety of performers here in town, not just with Cirque du Soleil, but with the vaudeville arts and the circus arts. And there has been some research. Cirque du Soleil has sponsored some of that research, but there's a lot more that could be done with that. And again, finding linkages to their issues and how it will relate to other performing artists. And then finally, I think we have an environment here with people who are multidisciplinary. We have the musicians. They don't just play classical music, they have to do show music. Some of them have to improvise. So we have a lot of artists here who are doing a variety of things like that. And that's sort of a unique thing too, and that has its own special challenges. Finally, I'm just thinking right now, one of the biggest resources we have here for studying all of this is that we have one of the largest school districts in the country that actually engages the performing arts from elementary school all the way through high school. We have choral, band, theater programs, dance programs in all of our schools. So there's just a wealth of guinea pigs out there for these research studies. And so I think that's sort of an untapped resource that I would really like us to take advantage of in this area.
And Steve,
Yeah,
passive cigarette smoke as well, right?
That's true, absolutely. That's another one. And again, that's aggravated because of the dryness here in the desert.
And for those, Drum Corps International is one of our partners in Athletes in the Arts. And so any of the outdoor, I mean, think about the drum corps or the drum outs, any of those outside things in your environment where in the summertime the heat is what it is. So trying to deal with heat issues and hydration is also another challenge that people might face.
Thank you for that. Are there any final thoughts and comments from our wonderful panelists? We're getting toward the hour mark here, so. Any final thoughts?
I'll say one more thing. I just want to say how incredible you are, Nancy, for supporting and encouraging all this work. I think we're really lucky here at UNLV to have you as a dean. And the reason a lot of these things that we've heard about just now have happened is totally because of you. So thank you again.
I think no one does something alone. I feel incredibly fortunate to have all of you, and we're a team, and we have a very exciting road ahead. And I really thank all of our panelists. Thank Jerry Crawford and Rick Crawford. Thank Ashley Stone. Stephen, thank you for how nurturing you've been about these ideas. And thank you, Randy, Dak, Marc, and Stephen, for being incredible panelists who've really opened up so many ideas for us today. So hopefully we'll continue.
Nancy, could I say one more thing? I'm sorry, I just had a thought. I know you're on a roll, but
we're not. No, we have time. Go ahead.
So for Dak and for Dr. Kahn, you know, we talked about trying to better educate folks. One of the things, if you all have professional meetings where you're allowed to add a symposium of some kind to that professional meeting, oftentimes getting this in front of folks as sort of it might seem to be sort of an odd thing, but if you have the pull to do that, within Athletes in the Arts, we can get you speakers. I know you got good resources right there at UNLV, but you know, I'll throw that out, that if we can work together to gain more exposure at some of the professional meetings maybe that you go to by talking about that with your colleagues, I just want to let you know we'll be happy to help, and I'm sure there's people at UNLV that would be too.
That's such a great invitation and a thought for the future. Thank you so much. We will be working together, and please be in touch with all of us. Anyone in our group here listening, I think we do want to continue this conversation, and we really look forward to that. So again, I want to thank everyone for this really inspiring forum. We're very, very grateful for everyone's efforts. We appreciate your time, and more to come. Isn't that the most wonderful thing of all, the continuum that we're on? We'll keep thinking, we'll keep innovating, and we'll keep creating knowledge and educating our students. So it's really a great opportunity we have. Thank you all so much.